While I was still in the desert, I received the divorce papers via email instead than in person. In a PDF download, a marriage that lasted 13 years came to an end. My name is Ethan, and I am a staff sergeant with the 82nd Airborne National Guard. I am 42 years old. When Becky made the decision that she was done waiting, I had been in Kandahar for a total of 4 months. It was written in the subject line, "Let's act like adults about this." This particular message consisted of 3 sentences in total. The documentation had already been submitted by her. Already, she had depleted the funds in our joint account. It was already the case that she had relocated her new boyfriend, Jeremy, into our Spokane home. In addition to closing my laptop, taking a shower in the shared stall, and getting dressed for my shift, I did not communicate with anyone else. I read the email twice. On that particular night, when I returned to my berth, I responded with a single phrase. "It is comprehended." Yes, that was it. No fighting, no pleading, and no threats were made. My roommate, Wilson, observed that something was not quite right. He asked, "You good, man?" without looking up from the book he was reading. Yes, I did say that. Just a few things from back at home. Once he gave a slight nod, that was the final word. The men in the military are aware of when to leave things alone. In all honesty, I was not surprised by it. 6 months prior to the deployment, things had turned out differently. Little things to consider. She stopped asking about my day, starting working late at the dental office where she answered phones, and started going to the gym 3 times a week, but she never seemed to raise a sweat. Becky stopped inquiring about my day. There are new passwords on her phone, new outfits, and new pals that I have never met. I did not confront her. I did not begin checking her texts, and I did not even begin to follow her about. I do not identify with that. However, I was not blind either, and as a result, I made some stealthy action of my own. The measures are nothing out of the ordinary. With the help of the VA loan and the documentation for military benefits, I was able to store vital documents in a storage unit located across town. These documents included my birth certificate, my marriage license, and a house deed that only had my name on it. I relocated the watch that belonged to my grandfather as well as the ancient silver that belonged to my mother to the same unit. Things that were significant. I also started transferring a portion of my earnings to an other bank account that I formed for myself at a different financial institution. It is not enough that she would notice, but it is plenty that I would not have to start from scratch in the event that things went wrong. When I arrived at the airport the night before I was to deploy, she gave me a hug and promised that I would be safe. It appeared as though she was saying farewell to a colleague rather than a husband who was going to war, because her eyes were dry. There was a part of me that still hoped I was wrong, even though I should have known then. No, I wasn't. In addition to the fact that she was unaware of the fact that I had planned for this particular occasion, she was also unaware of the fact that I never initiate fights. I do, however, complete them. In 2010, I discovered Becky at a cookout hosted by a friend. I was in Spokane, staying with my friend Jason, during the time when I was home between tours. However, she ended up working as an administrative assistant at a dentist clinic instead of completing her nursing degree. She stated that there would be less tension. A total of 8 months later, we tied the knot. Despite the fact that she never really comprehended the concept, Becky would often express her pride in my service. Her father worked as a manager at a bank, and her brother was a pharmacist. There is no member of her family serving in the military. When she would ask me when I was going to acquire a real job, she did not realize that after 15 years, the Army was my profession, and not just a job I was doing to pass time. We purchased our home in the year 2014. It was nothing elaborate, but it was ours. There is a peaceful neighborhood, 3 bedrooms, and a tiny yard. My name was the only one on the mortgage because the VA loan was in my name. Nevertheless, I added her to the deed because that is what married people do, which is to share things. After we had been married for a year, my father passed away from a heart attack when he was shoveling snow. Although she never smoked a single cigarette in her entire life, my mother passed away 3 years later from lung cancer. Although they did not leave me a fortune, they did leave me enough money that Becky and I would be able to pay off her student loans and yet have some money left over. During the course of our marriage, I was deployed 4 times, twice to Iraq and twice to Afghanistan. It felt as though Becky was acting out a character that she had outgrown after each time I returned home. She appeared to be a little more distant and a little more restless. She informed me once that I had not signed up to be a military wife, and she said this after I had raised the possibility of re-upping for another 4 years. It's getting old for me to be by myself all the time. Despite the fact that I was aware of this fact, the Army was the only organization in which I ever felt like I genuinely belonged. I was quite skilled in my work. I was the one who everybody relied on. The year 2019 marked the beginning of changes, first of a minor nature. Becky got annoyed when I called during her girls' nights, starting talking about how her buddy Melissa had divorced her husband and was living her best life now, started making comments about how we didn't really have anything in common anymore. Counseling was something I suggested. We were only going through a period, she explained, and everything was fine. And then there were the late hours at work, the weekends away with pals I had never met, the new outfits, and the gym membership that she hardly ever used. It was my responsibility to address her. However, it is not how I deal with situations. I have never done so. I learned from my father to ponder before I speak and to be certain before I take action. So I watched, and I prepared, discreetly, since my instinct was telling me something was coming. Finally, in this life, you learn to have faith in your instincts. 2 weeks after receiving the email regarding the divorce, I was seated in the mess hall when I heard a buzzing sound on my phone. We received a notification from our bank app, another withdrawal, this time for $8,500, which was practically all the remaining funds. After putting my fork down, I opened the application. As of that moment, the amount of the joint account was $212.37. Our funds, which totaled $47,000 and had been accumulated over the course of several years, had been completely wiped out and transferred to an account that I was unfamiliar with. Murphy, one of the guys from my unit, took a quick look at the situation. What's the bad news? Yes, I did lock my phone. Not at all. It's just some account detail. During that evening, I made a call to our bank from the base communication center. As it turned out, Becky had been moving money for several weeks, initially in smaller quantities and then gradually increasing them. The major transfers began the day after I returned from my deployment. After hanging up, I remained in the hallway for a considerable amount of time, admiring the men as they laughed and called their children, their spouses, and their parents. While my life was in flames, I was surrounded by people going about their normal lives. At that moment, Wilson came across me. He said that he had heard from Alvarez that you appear to have seen a ghost when you were reading there. What's going on? For the most part, I don't talk about private matters, although there was a time when Wilson helped me get out of a difficult circumstance in Canada. I had faith in her. I told her that she had dumped all of our money into our bank account and relocated her boyfriend into our home. While I was on patrol the previous week, I managed to send divorce paperwork. Wilson didn't give me the typical, meaningless nonsense. I'm sorry. That's awkward. Maybe you'll find someone better. No, I'm sorry. Just now, he inquired, what were your plans? It is not yet clear, I stated. He indicated with a nod. Please let me know if there is anything that you require. That night, I was unable to fall asleep. I retrieved my laptop and logged into our home security system, which Becky most likely forgot I could access remotely. I was able to take use of this feature. A strange truck was parked in our driveway, and a man who I had never seen before was walking our dog while using my coffee mug and wearing my Seahawk sweatshirt. The cameras captured an image of this. And there she was, Becky, giggling in the kitchen that I had remodeled under my own initiative during my most recent leave. What was going on inside of me changed. Not precisely fury, but rather something more icy and transparent. After closing the laptop, I took out my phone and wrote a list of things to do. He is James, a friend from the Army who later became a lawyer. Examine the terms of the VA loan. In the event of an emergency, please contact the Master Sergeant. Review the documentation pertaining to the home refinancing, which Becky mentioned in passing the previous year. Verify the safety of the accounts that I have for my military pension. My feelings of sadness had subsided. Even then, I didn't feel any anger. I had the impression that I was making preparation for a mission. The issue at hand was not one of feeling. This was a matter of strategy. A message with the subject line was sent to James via email at 0500, which was before the start of my shift. Need assistance with legal matters. Secretive and time-sensitive. An hour later, he responded to my inquiry. Talk to me, in the only secure line. As soon as I hung up from that call, I was fully aware of the actions that I needed to take. I didn't have to holler at all. There was no need for me to threaten. There was no need for me to confront her at all. The only thing I needed to do was wait and observe, and I had to allow her actions come to be the trap. It had been 2 months since I had last set foot on American soil. Becky was not informed that I would be returning home. Not a phone call. Did not send a text. A different name was used when I checked into a motel in the downtown area of Spokane, and I got in touch with James. We arranged to meet in a diner that was located 10 miles outside of the town. The moment he stepped into the booth, he remarked, "You look like hell." Not only do I feel like it, but I also. The folder was given to me by James. Received all that was discussed. The deed to the house, the documentation for the loan, the bank statements, and this. He made a different paper available to him. I was looking into your finances and came across something that I found to be interesting. My signature was included on the application for the refinancing of the loan. On the other hand, that was not my signature. No, not quite. Somebody had attempted to reproduce it, but they had omitted several specifics. Both the middle initial and the stroke pattern were incorrect, and I did not create them. Despite the fact that I was previously aware of the answer, I had asked Becky about it. James gave a slight nod. It was 3 months ago. Take out $30,000 from the stock in the company. Given that the VA loan is only in your name, your signature is necessary for that particular transaction. According to what I stated, you should forge my signature, then take out a loan against our house, then empty all our funds, and finally divorce me. Woman with a lot going on. He said that things will get better. As a co-applicant, she included her partner in her petition. There is a record for him. There were 2 DUIs and a charge of fraud from 2019. As I did so, I inhaled deeply. What are the choices I have? Several, according to James. However, one must first determine what it is that they desire. The idea crossed my mind. The things that are legally mine are what I want, and I want her to be aware of the repercussions. James wore a grin. Consequently, this is what we do. The next day, I drove by our home on my way to work. Becky's car was parked in the driveway, but the truck that belonged to her boyfriend had vanished. I parked my car further down the street and watched for a while. During that time, I entertained the idea of going up to her and addressing her. However, that was not the intended outcome. Instead, I headed to the bank, where I met with the loan officer who had handled the refinance. I presented him with my military identification, as well as a genuine signature on my driver's license and the fake paperwork. His complexion became drab. Immediate action is required of me to report this. It is clear to me, I stated. A police report has already been submitted by me. Earlier that evening, Becky sent me a text message. If you have been in the bank, who have you been talking to? Jeremy mentioned that individuals were posing inquiries. I did not give a response. The following day, I went to the office of the county clerk, where I submitted documentation challenging the refinance since it was fraudulent, and recorded a legal notice that made it impossible for any alterations to be made to the property without my there. Becky picked up the phone 2 days later. The call was left on my voicemail. Let's have a conversation. Ethan, about the residence, the bank made a phone call. What exactly are you doing? In the event that this pertains to the divorce, we are able to discuss it as grown-ups, just like adults. Her email contained the exact same phrases. Even now, I have not responded. It was that afternoon that James called. They not only blocked the money for the refinance, but there is more. Does it seem as though the boyfriend of your wife has been driving your truck? Which one is named after you? It's true. He was driving with a license that was suspended as a result of those DUIs when he was pulled over this morning. They placed the vehicle under impound. All okay, I said. Additionally, he had packed the truck with a few odd items. The dental practice where Becky worked provided the prescription pads that were used. The blanks were not empty. I lowered my gaze and closed my eyes. She has been stealing pads for writing prescriptions? As far as it appears, police are conducting an investigation. I hung up the phone and sat down on the side of the bed in the motel room. It was becoming more significant than I had anticipated. A portion of me desired to call Becky and put her on notice. Routines that have aged. Then, however, I recalled the footage from the surveillance cameras. This is my life, my dog, and my home. It was given away as if it had no significance. At this point, the journey was this number. To tell you the truth, I didn't want to go back, but I couldn't turn around. During the next morning, I had a meeting with the bank fraud investigator. Mr. Thompson was his name. There was a coffee stain on his tie, and he was a short guy with sleepy eyes. In the process of spreading documents across his desk, he stated that this occurs more frequently than you might expect. Spouse is moving out. One of the partners recognizes an opportunity. What takes place at this moment? I inquired about it. The monies that were obtained through the illegal refinance have been frozen. However, there is a problem. A portion of the funds have already been used. What is the amount? $14,600 is around half of the total. Then I leaned in closer. Where will it be found? Thompson was still unsure. That is not something that I am supposed to divulge to anyone. It's my home there. It is a fabricated name. It was snatched from me. After a hesitant nod, he turned his computer screen toward me and continued to look at me. From the refinancing account, these are the transfers that have been made. I looked through the list. Transfers made to a person called Daniel Spencer on multiple occasions. I'm not Jeremy. Anyone else that I had never heard of before. Daniel Spencer is a mystery. I inquired about it. He shrugged his shoulders. You should urge your attorney to issue a subpoena for these records, even if it is not my department. When I got out of the bank, I immediately gave James a call. He reiterated the name Daniel Spencer. I'll check it out for you. The following hour, he returned the call. That's it. Specifically, Daniel Spencer is a real estate agent, offers a specialization in cash deals and rapid sales. It was my understanding that she intended to sell our home. When I finally understood it, it was like a punch to my body. As far as it appears, it is likely that the deposits were earnest money that he used to get the listing process started. The fascinating part comes at this point. However, there have been previous transactions between Spencer and Jeremy Ryan. Jeremy Ryan is the boyfriend of your wife. It is correct. In the past 2 years, they had successfully completed 3 transactions jointly. Attempting to make sense of this, I sat down on a bench in the park. Apparently, Becky did not simply abandon me in favor of another man. Is it true that this was a prearranged operation? It's possible, James said with caution. In my research on Jeremy Ryan, I conducted some digging. There is a pattern to his behavior. Assist women who are going through the process of divorce or spouses who are serving in the military. My search has yielded 3 cases so far. Each time, one of Spencer's customers purchases the woman's property at a price that is significantly lower than the current market worth. A cut is given to Ryan. After that, he continues on. Is that Becky? Was she aware of this thing? Difficult to say. It's possible that she is also a victim. It's also possible that she is in on the secret. I rubbed my whole face. From that point on, it was no longer simply about Becky betraying me. This was a more significant event, something that was calculated. Moreover, other families of military personnel had become victims. What should we do? I inquired. According to James, I have already had a conversation with the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI. This pertains to military people and borrows money from the Veterans Affairs VA program. This piques their attention. In the evening, I sat in my room at the motel with a beer and reflected on all that had happened. I was curious as to whether or not Becky had been playing me throughout our entire marriage, or whether or not she had become entangled in Jeremy's game, pondering whether or not it existed at all. The ringer on my phone. This time, Becky, please give me a call. Ethan, the financial institution is making a statement on fraud, and Jeremy was taken into custody for driving your truck. What is going on is beyond my comprehension. I admired the message for a considerable amount of time. My next step was to type, "Who is Daniel Spencer?" There were 3 dots that emerged as she began typing. Then she stopped, then she started again, and ultimately she stopped. "I have no idea what you are having a conversation about." It was written that I had 14,600, many different transfers. For sale of a house? For 10 minutes, there was no reaction. Then, "It is not what you believe it to be." Afterwards, I went to bed and turned off my phone. James made a phone call the following morning. "The FBI is interested in meeting. The investigation into Ryan and Spencer has been going on for several months. It is possible that you are the case that cracks the code, even though you are not the first." After receiving that news about the divorce, I finally had a sense of contentment for the first time in a long time. It was not because my marriage had ended, but rather because the truth was slowly but surely being revealed. At their field office in Spokane, I had the opportunity to meet with FBI agents. Donovan and Patel, both of whom are agents. Not only did they take copies of all the documentation that James and I had obtained, but they also recorded my statement. According to Agent Patel, your case contributes to the establishment of a pattern, demonstrates intent and organization, and indicates that it is conspiracy rather than a series of individual instances. Where does Becky stand? I inquired about it. My wife, who was previously my wife. Each of the agents looked at the other. Donovan stated with great care that we are still in the process of determining her level of involvement. Have she ever mentioned having problems with her finances? Pressure to sell the house. What is it? I recalled the past. She never stopped pointing out that we were housing poor and that we ought to downsize. It didn't seem necessary to me. I was able to take care of our mortgage payments with the money I made. A note was made by Patel. When exactly did that begin? Approximately 6 months ago, which is roughly when she must have first encountered Jeremy. Are you referring to the refinancing, Donovan? Never once did you bring it up with me. During the time that I was deploying, she forged my signature. In addition, they took more notes and asked more questions. Patel gave me her card once we had completed our conversation. We will get back to you. For the time being, steer clear confronting either your wife or Ryan. Careful construction of this case is required of us. I gave a slight nod. It is comprehended. On that particular evening, I drove back to our area and parked my car just a few blocks away from our residence. It appears that Jeremy may have been successful in releasing his truck from impound. What was left of Becky's car? The ringer on my phone. Message sent by Becky. We need to have a face-to-face conversation. The next day, we will meet in Riverfront Park. I'll give you a call next morning. When James and I had breakfast the following morning, I showed him the text. Do not leave, he urged people. Conversation with her at this moment will not result in anything positive. I won't, I promise. I would like to know what she is doing today while she is under the impression that I am going to meet her. At 9:30 in the morning, we drove to our home and parked our vehicle across the street. At 9:45, Becky emerged from the building, climbed into her vehicle, and drove away in the direction of Riverfront Park. What should we do now? James inquired about it. Let us now wait, I stated. An automobile arrived 20 minutes after the initial arrival. It is the emblem of the real estate agent on the door. It is Daniel Spencer. It was Jeremy who came out to talk to him. They then went inside after having a conversation in the driveway. Are we supposed to follow them? James inquired about it. I gave a slight shake of my head. Not at all. The previous year, I installed security cameras both inside and outside the building. They upload files to a cloud storage service. James wore a grin. That wasn't anything you brought up earlier. As I pulled out my phone, I stated that it had never come up. By opening the security app and adjusting the screen angle, I made it possible for James to see. We found Spencer and Jeremy in the main room of our home. There was Spencer taking photographs. The elements of the house were being pointed out by Jeremy. I increased the loudness settings. As Spencer was saying, the list ought to be completed by the end of the week. I already have a customer who is interested in that. As is customary, give me cash. What is the amount? Asking was Jeremy. Is it $420? They offer $420, which means that everyone is satisfied with the price. How about the hubby, though? According to Becky, he is leading to problems. A contemptuous wave was given by Spencer. All of the men in the military are the same. Even if they are making a lot of noise, they have deployments and responsibilities. To make it disappear, he is willing to accept a settlement. I switch my attention to James. Do you understand this? Already, he was working on recording the feed on his mobile device, each and every syllable. A brief message was sent to Agent Patel in order to provide him with access to the security stream. This is currently taking place. A quarter of an hour later, our home was surrounded by vehicles belonging to the FBI. Handcuffs were used to lead Spencer and Jeremy out of the building, and I observed from a distance down the street. It rang on my phone. Patel, the agent. She said that she had recorded them talking about the fraudulent plot. Additionally, the offense of attempting to sell property under false pretenses, as well as conspiracy and wire fraud. You are going to be required to provide us with a formal statement. It was obvious, I replied. Moreover, Mr. Briggs, just now, your wife has arrived at the location. She is in a state of distress. My eyes traveled along the street. Becky was observing the FBI agents as they removed boxes of paperwork from our residence, as she was standing on our lawn with her hands closed over her mouth. In what way does she end up? I inquired about it. Patel stated that it is dependent, based on what she was aware of, as well as on what you desire. For an extended period of time, I observed Becky, the teen years of getting married. In the beginning, this was a good year, earlier than whatever this had developed into. At long last, I expressed my desire to do what is right. Rapid progress was made in the federal case. In what turned out to be a three-state operation that targeted military families, Jeremy and Spencer both accepted plea deals, which implicated each other as well as numerous other persons who were involved in the conspiracy. Becky insisted that she was unaware of the wider strategy or its implications. It was said that Jeremy had managed to persuade her that I was concealing money and intending to leave her with nothing, that the refinancing was his idea was stated. She had simply agreed to go along with it. Possibly, such was the case. Or perhaps it wasn't. Regardless of the circumstances, she consented to a settlement, which included the complete return of the cash that were taken, the surrender of any claim to the property or my military pension, and a signed confession to forgery. I agreed to refrain from filing charges in exchange. In the 6 months that followed the email from Kandahar, the divorce was finally made official. All things considered, there is no wrongdoing, and the break is clean. I received a phone call from Agent Patel on the day that the final paperwork was agreed upon and signed. Today, Jeremy Ryan was given a sentence of 8 years in prison for the crimes of identity theft, conspiracy, and fraud. The score for Spencer was 12. I figured you might be interested in knowing this. As I mentioned, I am grateful. She went on to say that there was another issue. We discovered proof that they had done this to 11 other families of military personnel. Using your case, we were able to construct a pattern. As a result of your actions, those families might be able to obtain their money back. After we had finished our conversation, I went outside to watch the sunset from the porch of my rental apartment. I was thinking about the other families and the other guys who had gone overseas with the belief that their homes and marriages were secure, only to return home to find them empty. I was not the one who intended to be the one to bring down the business that Jeremy and Spencer were running. What I sought was simply what was mine. But there are instances when things turn out in ways that you did not anticipate. The ringer on my phone. Message sent by Becky. I never intended for things to transpire in this manner. I did not give a response. Nothing else could be said at that point. 1 year later, I finally sold a house. It was no longer something I could bear to live in, because such walls contain an excessive amount of memories and treachery. On the outskirts of Missoula, Montana, I purchased a modest cabin with the money that I had. A creek runs behind the property. There are 2 bedrooms, 10 acres of land, and there are no neighbors for miles. My retirement from the Army came earlier than expected. The 20 years were sufficient. I had reached my limit. In the form of a German Shepherd, I have a dog named Scout. Commenced providing carpentry services to the community. Although it was nothing special, it kept my hands busy and allowed me to pay my bills. Everything else was covered by my military pension. Occasionally, I found myself thinking about Becky and wondering where she had gone. According to James, she had relocated to her hometown in the state of Oregon, employed at a different dental office facility. Making a fresh start, I suppose. It was no longer that I detested her. If I'm being completely honest, I didn't really feel anything about her. I, too, had made my decisions, and she had made hers. I was surprised to get a letter from a woman in Fort Worth one evening. When Jeremy and Spencer attempted to carry out their plan on her, her husband was serving the Navy and was away on deployment. As part of the investigation, the FBI had provided her with my name. It is true that you are not familiar with me, yet you have rescued our house. You are to be commended for standing up for yourself when it would have been simpler to simply walk away. I gave it a second reading, and then I affixed it to the refrigerator. I would look at that letter on certain days, when the stillness seemed too loud or the memories became too clear, and I would remember that something positive had resulted from everything that had happened. When I last heard, Jeremy was still being held in custody. Likewise, Spencer. Once again, the system was successful. Regarding myself, I was figuring out how to move forward, from one peaceful day to the next, developing something brand fresh. It was something that could not be taken, forged, or betrayed in any way, something that was only mine to possess.